Hey, welcome to next episode of Next Creators. Today we have Conlan Rios with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So maybe we can start by you mentioning what you're working on right now.
Sure, yeah. I'm founder and CEO of Async Art, and Async Art is a creators platform where artists and musicians can deconstruct their work into layers and tokenize individual layers for ownership. And then they can take it a step further, where these creators can imbue their layers of their creation with abilities that are exclusive to the owner of those layers. So an example of this would be, a digital art piece where the background is a separate layer that can be owned, and that background may have multiple states provided by the artist, like sunny, nighttime, lightning, and then the collector who owns that layer can change it due to their artistic whim. And that's kind of the surface level of it, but that's the basis of it.
Was this feature always kind of designed to be there, or
Yeah, so the original Genesis concept was like, well, if we have digital art, right now a lot of it's replicating the old world. You do watercolor, oil paintings, you scan it, and you put it up. But with digital art, like, why can't you like reach into the work and like own part of it, and then also participate somehow? And so that was it's evolved since then, but that was the original concept.
got it? Yeah, so we will go into async art a little bit later, but I wanted to also spend some time on the background because our audience, a lot of people are crypto curious. Generally, they kind of like were very interested in understanding where people come from, different walks of life, even pre-crypto. So I was wondering, where did you grow up?
So Bay Area. I've been in the Bay Area pretty much my whole life.
And did you decide that you want to work for yourself pretty early on? Like, when was the particular point in time in your career when you're like, I'll actually gonna run my own kind of project?
So I didn't always think that I would work on my own company, but I did have an early start in tech. So I left school early at 16, self-taught myself a bunch of things, and at 18 I just started cold calling startups and asking for, if they if they needed work done. And so I started working at a startup at 18, and then basically just hopped around from different startups, um, and then started async about 2 years ago. So I was about 31. So when I started, I had about 13 years of experience in the space. But yeah, hadn't really envisioned it. It kind of just happened, and yeah.
And how did you also get into game development? What was the inspiration there? Were you always a gamer or game developer?
Absolutely. So I've always loved games. Even before video games, I was making like cardboard games out of paper and pencil and stuff when I was a kid. Eventually got into game development, at home, just self-teaching. Um, And even when I was working at startups, I was basically building games, usually as a way to like learn new platforms. So when iOS first came out, or like the App Store first launched, like that was the way I taught myself to write for iPhone, was building some simple games. For Flash back in the day, mobile programming for mobile phones, Java, J2ME, always building games. Games are a great way to like learn a platform. And that kind of translated into crypto also, like the same thing, like not building games, but building experiences and apps for various projects.
Mhm. And for your gaming project, so was it Offworld that was focusing on mobile, or was it Osmo? Like, how was that transition between those two?
Yeah, so Offroad was like kind of these indie games I was building, sometimes with like friends. And Yeah, that was just like kind of a sidetrack that throughout my professional career, was just building, you know, indie games for iOS, for desktop. We did some ports of board games. We reached out to some board game developers and like, licensed their designs and worked with them. Just all around big game fan.
And Osmo was also an indie game studio, or was it something else?
Yeah, so Osmo was, they're based on the Bay Area, and what they do is they do like augmented reality learning games for kids using mobile devices and tablets. And what they do is it's a really really amazing concept. What they do is they have a stand that you put your mobile device in, your phone, your tablet, and they put a reflector on top of the camera. And so it's a very simple mirror reflector, but when you put it on your camera, it reflects the camera feed back into the game. And so this allows you to have physical manipulation. So you can have like cardboard pieces, wooden toys. You can actually play with your game, play with games, but you're using physical pieces to interact with them. And so it's like it's great for cognitive development, because like every kid in the Bay Area now has like an iPad or a tablet, Android tablet, and you lose a lot of the tactical feedback that you get when you play with like Tinker Toys. And so this is bringing some of that back into that because at the end of the day you can't deprive your kids of the devices nowadays. So it's just a healthy screen time.
Nice. And what was also the kind of like challenges of the gaming business as you entered it, either on indie gaming or on augmented reality side of things? Like, how would you describe the kind of the industry and challenges?
Yeah, I'd say on the indie gaming side, the biggest part was just getting visibility for games. It's a really competitive space. There's just so many things going on, and to get attention, kind of it's very fleeting. To get attention in a game for more than a few months, like it's very competitive. To get coverage, so I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge facing indie developers. The tool sets are all there. As an indie game developer, there's so many tools now: Unreal, Unity, Game Maker. It's so easy to make a game now. But to get people to actually pay attention to it. So that's on that side. On the Osmo side, I'd say the biggest challenge was it's similar to crypto, like onboarding people. Like once you got people into the system, they would love it and they'd get into all the games. But there's sometimes an initial onboarding curve about getting your device set up, getting it connected to your account. Um, because you have to connect, you have to download an app, you have to set up a hardware. So there's a lot of work done into onboarding people.
Hmm. And I guess last question about indie gaming had did any platforms at that time, be it like each or Humble Bundle or Congregate, were like really helpful in that point in time?
I did do a Kickstarter for one of the games. That was I think I mostly did it for the experience, but it was great experience. It was a great way to connect up to all the possible people who would want to play your game. Didn't try Humble Bundle as a developer. Of course, bought a lot of games there. So I'd say Kickstarter was pretty great.
And when did you encounter crypto for the first time?
Yeah, so I've thought about this. The very first time I read about Bitcoin early on, um, like when I say early, like really early on, like it was like pre-Coinbase even. There was like I tried to download the wallet and run or the software and mine it, but I couldn't get it to work, and so I gave up on it. And then a couple years later, a coworker of mine, this was 2012, a coworker of mine was saying he was building a business with Bitcoin for couch surfing. And so I thought that was really interesting. And so that's when I got into. I started buying it, and I went on Coinbase and bought it, bought some. So again, you're just as a trader, just buying it and then reading about it. Going on Reddit, just prowling in the community, but being like, okay, there's something here. I think something like this will definitely have to exist because there's people outside the Western countries where they don't have access to a bank account or a passport, but they want to participate. At a minimum gamers in Brazil wanting to buy games off Steam. Like that was one of the early cases where like I think Steam experimented with accepting Bitcoin. So a bunch of these examples were like okay, like this has to exist at some level uh, for us to move forward. But then didn't really stick with it. Like after a couple of years, it became in the back burner. I used it a bit. I enjoyed using it, but didn't really get into it until Ethereum came out. And when Ethereum came out and people started talking about that, and then now you have smart contracts and decentralized applications, and then I got interested again um, from a different friend who actually was saying, "Hey, like, yeah, check this thing out," and all the promises of all what you could do on that. That's what really started getting me like excited. You know, decentralized prediction markets and and loans and all sorts of this cool stuff.
Hmm. And how did you go from being crypto curious, kind of like trader first around Bitcoin era, to then maybe like starting to delve your probably like start doing some experiments around Ethereum because it was technological platform. How did you get to actually starting your own project in space?
Sure. So in the Bitcoin days, it was all on Coinbase because, like, for me, it was like, well, they manage it. But when you go into Ethereum, it's like, well, you're limited now. You have to move off the exchange if you want to interact with the apps. Um, and so, yeah, just again, started as a trader, day trader, going to different projects, collecting coins, surfing, ETH Delta, Fork Delta. Those are the earlier days of the altcoins. But just getting really immersed and listening to a lot of podcasts, like every day on my commute, it was all podcasts. Like there were just years of like just nothing but crypto podcasts. Um, Again, discovering projects like MakerDAO was an early one. What was the other one? The lone one, ETHLend. and again, starting to use the dApps and being like, okay, this is really cool. I'm actually able to use it. This is different than Bitcoin. Like I'm actually able to use the Ether, and I'm buying Ether now to like actually use it. So that was like a really big revelation. So I went from trading coins to using dApps, and then finally I was like, well, okay, I'm experiencing some apps that like I really like using, but there's not enough tooling around them for me to enjoy it. So that's why I started building applications and dashboards for these projects as a way to like get a deeper understanding of the project and sometimes meet the team. And so that's how I got my space as a developer in crypto. So I built the first Compound liquidation dashboard for the community. So I met the team at Compound. I worked on the first version of Uniswap.info, which was an analytics dashboard. It's different now, but the first version of it was an analytics dashboard for liquidity providers. That's how I met the team there, Hayden. Um, was contracted for some of the early projects on DeFi Pulse. So some of the early projects in DeFi Pulse when it was up and running first launched, I was contracting there. So again, just building these crawlers, dashboards, Twitter bots, whatever I could for projects, and then met a ton of people in the space, uh, fully drinking the Kool-Aid at that point, and just yeah, that's how I really just got immersed. And then at some point, I was like, you know what, I got to do this full time. I don't know how, but I'm thinking about crypto in my sleep. I gotta work full time now.
Hmm. And I assume at the time when you were starting async, there was pretty much like DeFi activity starting to happen and like close to zero activity happening on the creator economy side of things, right?
Yeah, so this was 2019. So NFTs were, the standard had been out there. There was, most of the OG art platforms were launched at that point. Um, so it wasn't anything like it is now, of course. But Super Rare was out, Maker's Place, Known Origin. This is pre Nifty Gateway though. Um, And so, yeah, just I got into actually met one of the co-founders in an app called CryptoVoxels, and CryptoVoxels is like Minecraft, an online world of Minecraft. But in order to build on the land, you actually have to own the land token. And at the time in 2019, all the NFT projects, as you know, there weren't many of them, but like all of them had a presence of some sort in CryptoVoxels, pretty much. They either had a storefront or an event space where they would hold events. And so once you go into CryptoVoxels, just walking around, that was your way to find like NFT projects because you walk up and you see like some weird sculpture or weird card or something. You're like, what is this? And you click into it, and you're like, oh, this is Marvel cards. Oh, this is like Maker's Place. So like, okay, and that's you sometimes you'd meet artists. Artists would, that was early days where artists are starting to build these virtual galleries to showcase their art. There wasn't a lot of activity going on yet, but like it was, it was definitely there. And if you like cyberpunk and like metaverse, Neuromancer, all that stuff, like you can be like, oh, okay, this is the future, like of um of the web, early days.
Yeah, well, actually, with our community, with Human Guild, we hang out in CryptoVoxels every Friday now. It's actually a really cool place. I see. And so, what? How did you also meet your founding team at the time?
Yeah. So uh, the on the design side, uh, this was No Shot. He was building Quest, like these like puzzles in CryptoVoxels, and that's I actually met him because I solved one of his puzzles and then reached out like when he solved it. Like yeah, they build these amazing puzzles. At the end of the puzzle, there'd be instructions on how to receive your NFT trophy, and like you'd have to reach out and contact him, and he would send it to you and verify that he actually had solved it and such. And I was really just blown away by the complexity of these puzzles. Um, and they're very Ready Player One. You go into like this metaverse, you have to solve it. They're very mysterious. Like I didn't know who No Shot was. There's a kind of funny story how we ended up meeting up afterwards. Um, and then Breadbreaker Lisa was we were collaborating together on some CryptoVoxel projects. Like there's a contest where you could make a build. So we built like some like vending machines that were actually usable. They're actually Uniswap vending machines. You could like swap your ETH for color, which is the token you needed to like paint your buildings in that world. So you could actually click these vending machines and like it would launch a Uniswap transaction. Because I'm all about utility, and I was like, I don't like that there's no builds in CryptoVoxels that don't have utility. Like they're beautiful, but I actually want to stay in the world. I don't want to like leave the world for it. And so we were collaborating on several projects there. So yeah, CryptoVoxels is really a big place where we all came together. Um, and then yeah, that's
That's cool. And when you get started on async art, was the idea to focus on art specifically, as in like visual art, or did you already have ideas about like music and other areas from the get go?
Definitely visual art. So, at that time, I'd been collecting art for about like 5 months. I was a top collector at almost all the platforms at one point, in the top 10 at least. So buying a ton of art from people, meeting the teams, and then meeting the collector, the artist. And really liking that. It was kind of like the human element to crypto. Like in DeFi, I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the DeFi, some of the DeFi culture. I like memes. I like the jokes, but it's less personable. Whereas the art side, you're knowing people's stories, like you're meeting artists, and you're like, oh, like these are real people, like actually like making beautiful things, and like I really like that. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm a collector. I like to participate and try to make some art of my own. And so that's when I was like, well, as a game developer, I would also like something for the participant to engage in, and that was the original idea. Where like I had this idea where like I like Diablo, and I was like, okay, well, maybe there'll be like a painting of like a campfire with like some like fantasy characters around the campfire huddling, and like, okay, well, maybe I could like tokenize like the dwarven barbarian, like the elven archer, and now you have like different people owning these characters, and then like provide different states for them. Like maybe you can customize the way they look, customize their pose, and like kind of like express yourself as a collector through the art piece. And as I started setting this thing up, and I was like, all right, well, I'm not a good artist, like drawer myself. Maybe I'll commission an artist to like draw them and such. And then what I realized was like the same thing as with games. When you make an art piece or a game, if people don't like that style of art, they just won't play your game. They're like, okay, well, I don't like it. Like I don't like pixel art, or I don't like this 3D rendered art. Like, and then you kind of arbitrarily xed out because the art style was there. So I was nervous about investing time and energy into this, and some people not even liking the art piece because the style didn't mesh with them. And that's where I paused and said, wait a minute, like I'm talking with artists every week. At that point, like I'm hosting art clubs in the CryptoVoxel world. Like I'm leasing virtual land to artists to build galleries. Like I'm with all these awesome artists. Why not build a platform for them to come in and they can do the art themselves? And that way, that's like a win-win because like I'm going to see a bunch of this cool artwork that I want to see, that's more like digitally native, but it's going to be a ton of styles. And so, like, okay, that way, like anyone can enjoy this. And so that's where the original Genesis piece that we launched with later on, about 4 months later, which is the First Supper. And it's exactly that. All of the artists, almost all the artists that are participating there, were people that I was leasing art land to. I was leasing virtual gallery land to them in CryptoVoxels, and so I had a relationship with them, and they all came together and contributed one or two layers to this piece, which is a remix of Da Vinci's Last Supper, and they all contributed a character of theirs.
Nice. And so the basically you had a lot of relationships there because you were doing the rotating galleries with artists in the virtual gallery, and then also this concept of layers you already had from pretty much day one, and people were collaborating around this.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And when you started, did you focus in particular vertical within visual art, or was it kind of like free for all, kind of like anybody can actually participate here?
So when we first launched, it was we didn't have a lot of the tools we have now. So like it was a lot of like working one on one with the artist. And so we wanted to do like, okay, let's do select drops, what they call, select releases, and really curate the first pieces that came out of this platform. So I'd say like for the first few months, it was mostly that. It was like, selectively bringing on new applicants, really closely, working really closely with them to release their pieces. Um, and over time, over the following months afterwards, that's when we started to open the platform up to more people. Today, we still don't have it fully available to like anyone, but we have a much more automated process where applicants can apply. And then once we vet that their artwork is in fact theirs, like that's our number one concern, then they're whitelisted and they can use our tool.
Hmm. I see. So you essentially doing curation when people apply.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then, what point in time did you decide to also branch out into music as well? What was that decision about?
Sure. So when we launched, we had conversations internally about like, oh wow, like could this apply to other types of media? And music was like one of them that came to mind, like because it's like, all right, well, like music is already naturally layered. Like when you talk about music, you're already thinking about lyrics or synths or piano, or like you think about parts of the song musically. Like when you talk about art, you say, hey, this part can change. Sometimes people are like, oh, well, what part can change? Like, and when you talk about music, it's very easy to call it like, oh, the lyrics. You can change the lyrics, and like, ah, people get it. Um, and so we knew we wanted to do that at some point when we launched, but we're like, all right, well, we're going to wait a bit because we're just going to focus on art. Um, and then, as we launched, every month we'd be hit with people saying, "Hey, this is awesome! Like, I'm a musician. Can I do it with music?" And like, that would just compounding up every single month. And like, even the applicants, sometimes people would apply and like their idea would be like, "Hey, like I'm a musician. I want to do music." And so it was around November, December of that year. So about 9 months after launch, 10 months after launch, they were like, "Okay, let's start working on this part because yeah." And the timing actually worked out pretty good because that's NFTs pretty much blew up like 4 or 5 months later, and then we got a lot of interest from musicians.
Hmm. And by the way, what would you attribute this whole kind of like crazy traction that NFT space experienced like very early this year?
I think honestly, anyone who tells you they could have predicted it is no one could have predicted it. And the reason and the proof is the entire community was trying to rebrand NFTs like at the end of last year. There are polls on Twitter. What should we rebrand NFTs to? Because no one is actually going to say that. It's too nerdy. Should we call it, rare digital art? Should we call this crypto art? Should we call it whatever? People are, going back and forth. And then, now here we are. NFTs are the headline on, the Wall Street Journal. I mean, like, so like that's it's kind of locked in place now. And I think I've talked with people about this, and like we think that it's because NFTs is like a new phrase and that it needed a new phrase. Like NFTs are so new that that's why it needed. Anyway, like it worked out well, but no one could have predicted it. I really think it was a culmination of things. Like I'd like to say Async Art definitely played a hand early on. When we first launched the first supper, collectively sold for about $80,000, which was the master and layers. Which I know, okay, this year it's not a lot of money, but at the time it was blew all the crypto art records out. But the whole space together, all of 2020, was a series of just record-breaking sales across different platforms. So I'd say, it definitely was building. I'd say one big moment was so Async Art. We were the first NFT that was part of a sale at Christie's. So there was a bundle. An artist named Robert Alice came to us. He had a series of pieces called Portraits of a Mind, and these physical Bitcoin pieces. It is a really cool concept about how all the pieces are distributed around the world, and like the owners are all decentralized. Um, and for one of his pieces, he wanted an NFT component, and so but he wanted a component that had something to do with time and location, time and physical space. And so the NFT that he bundled with it, it's very simple. It's a piece that changes the day and night, but the owner of the NFT can change the location of the time zone that the day and night runs on. And so the idea is the owner can basically set it to wherever the physical piece resides to. And so right now, I believe the piece is in New York Eastern time zone, so that's where the Eastern time zone is on. But yeah, so that was a big milestone for I think the entire community as a whole, where a piece of Christie's actually said comes with an NFT, an async art NFT. So yeah, I'd say that async art definitely helped through a few of these times. Definitely helped pioneer it. But of course, no one can deny that like the Beeple sale and Nifty Gateway, the first big one for I think about 2 million was a really big moment for the space. And then after that, the next Beeple sale I think probably was what rocketed it all to the forefront.
Interesting. I see. And what was happening at the time on the music side as you were like launching this new kind of vertical and this NFT, uh, this whole thing getting traction? What was happening on the music side?
Yeah, so when we launched music, we worked with several partners beforehand, months in advance to start setting this up. We basically were reaching out to the musicians who were interested, um, and the ones that we thought would really make a really good showcase for what the platform could do. And so when we launched Async Music, we had some initial partners. We had HMLTD, which was a pop band out of the UK, RAC, a pretty big electronic musician, big into crypto. We worked with a first time group called Very Degree Ensemble, which is a choir group out of Dallas. And, of course, we had to go with Connie Digital and Mighty 33 because Connie Digital is he's super OG in the space. In fact, like I have a whole track about how like we collaborated together on a Twitter bot like early on, and like I bought or like his art was some of the first acquires that I got, and his CryptoVox parcel was like one of the first parcels that basically brought me into the CryptoVox. So like Kanye is like, and I know he's big into music. So like when we launched, it's like all right, we gotta get Kanye in because like he's been pioneering music on the blockchain pretty early. Um, And yeah, so we worked with these partners just early on in the process, and they all pretty much got it from the get go. It all, because musicians are already thinking about music in layers. They call them stems, and so it made sense with them. And then we worked with them on their concepts a bit, and the cool thing about async music is that it already has async art as a cover. So the cover artwork is also an async art piece. So as the music changes, each state of the stem has a corresponding visual change. So like if the yeah, so the artist does it right, you can kind of get a sense of what the mix is going to sound like by looking at the cover. So if the cover is like kind of crazy and all that, you can kind of think, oh, maybe this is the crazy mix. Or if the cover is more like HMLTD and their song Leaving, they have some states of their stems which are blank silence. And when you change that state for a stem, like part of the cover will like go blank or go kind of like more subtle or still. So like the idea is you should be able to like feel the music even by looking at the cover.
That's really cool. And also, like, how do you think about like maybe new musicians who are getting started in the space? It seems like the space overall, like before crypto, the music label space was kind of consolidating. Right now, it's like three labels pretty much like controlling majority of the industry. Do you think crypto is for like bottoms up, kind of like for people who are like independent artists, or is it also for people who do have relationships with labels? How do you think about that? How do you also think about like economics of it, like how it works in like Web 2 space and how it works in crypto?
I think it's the same as with visual art, honestly. I mean, the visual art world is also similar in that, a lot of the really big sales, they're driven by a few centralized entities who, control what comes in, what goes out. Um, but just as with the visual art, crypto just it's democratizing because it at least gives you the artist a chance to sell directly. So it doesn't guarantee that everyone's going to sell suddenly because just because you're tokenizing, but at least now you can sell directly to your consumers in a way that wasn't really possible before. Again, like you might have been blocked by platforms or blocked by curation, but like now you can just make a piece and sell it literally in within an hour or so. So it's the same thing for music. The big record labels, I think, will use crypto and factor that in, and the whole I know there's movements around trying to like democratize like the rights around music, and like I don't think that's going to change anytime soon because the rights to a lot of our best music are just locked up by records, and so that's labels. So that's going to be held in place for a while. But for new musicians coming in, they now have the option of, hey, do I want to try and sign with a record label, or do I want to go out on my own? And if you go on your own, now you have crypto and you have you can basically sell directly to people. You can build your own virtual galleries. You can host your own virtual events, and it's a lot more accessible. It's like bringing, it's like what Blogger did for blogs. Now everyone can write a blog. Now with crypto, anyone can tokenize artistic works and sell them. And so I think it's good for the everyday creators who are just getting into this space.
And for artists and musicians, do you think that majority of the people that you see are people who think about it as I'm a creator and kind of like I do piece of work and I put it out there, or do you see also a lot of people who are like, well, actually, in Web 3, I also need to build my own community, I also need to build my own brand, kind of like people thinking about not only creating but also kind of building out the kind of following distribution around their own either brand or community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes people get into crypto creators and they think that like the first tokenizing is like the only thing they need to do, but no, it's that's like the first step. But like if you want to really sell directly to your consumers, like your customers, you do need to start building up your community, your brand, and it can be a little daunting, I'd say. To, like that would be one thing like um, for some creators in the space should be aware of. Like probably the best way to just get immersed in the community first. Meet as many people as you can, learn what people like, learn what the trends, and then start to try to sell creations in the space. Um, and also ideally, some people have teams. So like, all right, if you're just a musician, but have someone to partner up and help you build your community, and so forth. So yeah, it's definitely a factor. Like there's a reason why record labels exist. Maybe not the reason why they take so much money, but they do get you distribution and community and marketing. So it is a service.
Hmm. And for music, do you focus on particular verticals within music, particular genres, or kind of like similar to art, you're kind of pretty open to many things?
Yeah, yeah, very open. So when we launched, we try to be, we had choir music, we had kind of hip hop, and we had electronic and pop. In our next music wave, we had like more types of music. And then the music wave that's coming out this week, that just actually came out today, we have like classical music, like violins, we have lyrics, singing, we have pop, we have, of course, more electronic DJ stuff. So I think every way that we're doing, we really want to just showcase like, hey, this is not just for one music genre. This could really be for any music genre.
Hmm. And do you see that for majority of musicians, there is like kind of like really well, nothing is insured in a sense that like you don't know what's going to happen in terms of your sales. But do you see that a lot of musicians getting actually like really good traction, or it really depends? It's like really kind of like almost like like similar to like art and music and Web2 space. There's kind of like this couple people who like doing really well, and there's like kind of fat tail distribution.
Yeah, I'd say it definitely varies. It's great if you have a crypto. I mean, right now, because the predominant people buying NFTs are people who already have crypto, and that's true for the art side too. When art goes like these big gallery houses, like a lot of times it's still big crypto collectors. So those are still the big spenders in the space, and so the artists who come in who have a following within the crypto community typically end up doing better financially. But that being said, the tail for these sales is a lot longer than just selling a piece because for the music side, what we've also introduced is because you have these programmable songs that are changing, we introduced these fungible tokens called blank records, and there can be thousands of these. And when you buy a blank record, they allow you to capture the current state, both visually and audibly, of the song into an NFT. And this elongates the tail of sales so that okay, after your initial launch, you get some activity, but then you can always reheat and bring people back to it because there's more to buy than just the actual pieces of the song. There's these recordings which are like these like snapshot makers, and so these allow musicians to have like more. It's not just your initial release; it's all it's months afterwards potentially.
Mhm. And also, like, do you think that at some point you'll kind of go full circle and focus on gaming as well, and maybe like have you, or at least like have you considered what Web3 can bring to the gaming industry as well?
Um, Probably, I think we'll just stick to art for now. Like, there's been some really cool gamified pieces where, like, artworks where like people can own them and like kind of either battle or collaborate. There's an amazing piece that came out a couple weeks ago called Form Farm, where like layer owners actually collaborate to like govern themselves, and like the artists will like mint things based on how they collaborate. So I'd say like there's a lot of room for gamification within the artworks already. That being said, like I think there's a lot of really cool projects already trying to do gaming and NFTs. And so yeah, I think we'll just focus on the art for now.
That makes sense. Um, and also, like maybe we can talk briefly about overall your inspirations as you and things like words of advice you have for people who are crypto curious but maybe didn't quite jump into the space yet. So, do you have any like books or mentors that can like help you guide you through this entrepreneurship journey, or do you feel like you mostly rely on yourself and less so kind of like?
No, my favorite guy is I can't pronounce his last name very well, but Andreas Antonopoulos. Um, I think I don't like to have like role models or idols, but like okay, he's the real thing. I've seen him in person, and I would just say read The Internet of Money. He it's like his book that he comes out and he basically updates it every couple of years with like new stuff. But just it's an incredible book, and he has like these snippets where he'll talk about like one thing, and then it'll like for instance like he has his ideas of like there'll be self-driving cars, and like they'll be AI driven, and like they'll have like their own crypto wallets, and like you'll pay them, and like they'll use that money for cryptocurrency to like hire more cars and like expand their fleets. He just has like these like crazy snippets of ideas of things that are possible or that will potentially come from like the current crypto space. And also he just has a great way of thinking about like maximalism. He oftentimes people get asked people questions like, oh, it's better Bitcoin or Ethereum, and one of his best talks is like um, you should just go watch it on YouTube. But it's like Bitcoin versus Ethereum. It's like a shark versus like I think a bear, a shark versus a lion, and like well, it depends on the arena at which they're fighting. Are they fighting in a water tank or are they fighting on land? Because like you can't just compare them to. They have strengths and weaknesses for both, and it's true for all the chains. That the main chains that are out there. So he just has a great thinking of the space. Um, Very funny, very easy to watch the talks. His books are well written. So I'd say yeah, that's the number one guy I'd recommend for um, new people.
Mhm. And also pretty much his books mainly.
Yeah, his books, just read them all. And the talks are all on YouTube. Like, oh, all his books are all they're all open source. Like he just puts them out open source. He put out a couple books, Mastering Ethereum and Mastering Bitcoin, and these are slightly more technical. But like, if you want to try and develop a bit, like they have like some great like breakdowns on how to like build stuff on these chains, and yeah, very very accessible.
Hmm. And overall, like if you encounter people who are crypto curious but haven't quite jumped into the space, what do you normally say to them? Like how, like either encourage them or what kinds of things do you advise?
Yeah, no, that's a good question because I still have some people who I've been telling about crypto for 10 years, uh, and they're still skeptical. I'd say the okay, so one of the big things people say is, oh, well, there are a lot of scams in the space. And I say like, well, if you look at the scams, it's like writing off email technology because of like the Nigerian email scams like back in the day, right? Like every new technology is going to be, used. There's going to be bad uses of it, but like you can't like write it off because there's, like there's core technology there that will go on and be the future of the web. So I'd say like just look beyond the scams and you know try to find someone. It's always great if someone's in this space who can like kind of guide you to like a couple projects because it is really daunting. If you just go on Reddit and just look at projects, you're gonna get hit with like every other weird scam thing. So try to find a friend you trust, and then crypto's better with a friend. So like it's always fun to talk with a community of people. So I'd say try and join a community. It's probably better in the NFT space because the NFT space, while there are a ton of scams, obviously, I'd say there's less than at least DeFi, and it's easier to find an artist or collector community, um, and just have fun there.
Hmm. And also, how do you think? What is a good way to bring more founders into the space? Like from my perspective, is like not that many yet founders in crypto space for some reason. Like the amount of people entering the space is relatively low. So how would you go about like just getting more founders, entrepreneurs into the space?
Yeah, I would go for like I try to appeal to like people who are science fiction fans because like anyone who reads Neuromancer or Snow Crash, like those Ready Player One, let's say a more recent book, those worlds are only possible with blockchain. Like in Ready Player One, when the character Wade is like he gets a sword in one game and can go into another game to use it, like that there's in that world they don't talk about it, but clearly there's blockchain running because that's how you get the interoperability between these assets and these games. So like I'd appeal to the people in that way because that's what really got me into it. It's like, oh, all the cool worlds that I want to live in the future, blockchain has to be a thing for those worlds to work. Um, and so I'd say just talk like just listen to podcasts and talk with people because like if you find the right when you sit down with someone and start talking about blockchain, like the ideas that start coming out, like these assets, like interoperable game assets between experiences, or like getting loans to giving out loans to people in the third world because they can't get access to a bank, and like you know having loyalty points beyond a blockchain. So like I could go to Starbucks, get loyalty points, and like now sell them to someone else because I don't use Starbucks anymore, and like or take a loan out in Starbucks, or like there's all these cool ideas that are like just start to bubble up after a few minutes of talking. Um, and when people start listening to it, like they get fired up for like, oh wow, like I want to see some of these ideas in the real world.
Hmm. And where do people find more information about async art? Where would you suggest the audience who listen today to land?
Sure, yeah. Of course, the website async.art. That's the main website. Twitter/async art. I say Twitter and the website are the best places. We do have a Discord. It's on the website. If you go there, there's a link there. But yeah, just go to the site, check out the artwork, and if you're an artist, apply. And if you're a collector, see, just try and open your mind up and be like, hey, like maybe I own a layer of a piece that I can change, and it's just a new way to think about collecting art.
And do you have maybe any other parting pieces of advice for our listeners?
Um, uh, I just say just get into the space. I think crypto is. I think people in our age range, let's say I'd say mid 20s, mid 40s, in that range. This is the most exciting technological opportunity that we've ever had. Like the internet was really the first big one where it was Wild West. Anything can be built, and it's just yours for the taking to build. And like we really haven't had that since the internet boom. And like crypto, it is that space. Like, you know what I mean? So that's what I'd say. That's the opportunity.
Hmm. Well, thanks a lot. Thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.